Hey everybody, I'm Danica and I'm excited to talk with you today about Smartfin. So just starting with the motivation for Smartfin, this won't be news to any of you, but critical coastal ecosystems are just being really quite decimated by climate change and other factors. And it's that region close to the shore that's really important for a lot of reasons, but also difficult to study. Waves are breaking, it's an aggressive environment, and so it's difficult to get really high resolution, real-time data from that zone where a lot of these important systems are. So that was really the primary motivation behind developing the Smartfin. The Smartfin is a surf and paddleboard fin with temperature and motion sensors on board. So we're getting GPS, temperature, and then there's an accelerometer and IMU on there. So we're getting a bunch of data while the user surfs or paddleboards. The data are automatically transmitted then to the cloud. And for the user, it performs like any high-performing fin. We've actually had it tested by a couple of pros, and so they really loved it. Leah Dawson a few years ago won at Tofino with this fin profile, and so yeah, really can guarantee no loss of performance using a Smartfin. We proved this concept in a pilot in San Diego with a Surfrider chapter there. And we showed not only that the data are accurate and successfully fill in that gap between, on this image here, we're showing where buoys are, but basically that we can fill in the gaps left by other sensors. But that also, that surfers and paddleboarders are really eager to contribute. And so this solution allows us to deploy a lot of low-cost sensors to democratize coastal monitoring and really fill in that gap. So again, why are surfers and paddleboarders a good group to start with for this device? So not only do surfers and paddleboarders typically spend a lot of time in the water, are aware of how things are changing and eager to make a difference, but also, especially since the pandemic, these two sports are really booming. They've grown significantly in popularity. And Smartfin can also provide these users value beyond just kind of the climate aspect of this, because the data that we're gathering are also valuable to the users themselves. So this is where our app comes in. Through the app, users are able to see real-time or just afterward, able to see recorded data about their rides. And the important thing here is that it's gear that's integrated with your board. So you don't have to wear a watch or some other piece of equipment in order to get this data. And because it's integrated with the board, we're looking into how, for surfers in particular, there are some performance metrics that we can generate that you just can't get from something that's not integrated with the board in that way. The app also provides a platform to engage with places where there are specific data gathering initiatives, and then also have that community of users and connect with other folks who are using the Smartfin. Compared to other surf and activity trackers, we see here that Smartfin is uniquely positioned because it offers not only the performance features that users want, but also has this environmental impact component, which we also know is really important to this customer group. So our business model has kind of two sides to it. The main one is that the Smartfin is intended to be sold as a consumer device directly to surfers and paddleboarders who use it. And then also thinking about the data set as kind of a secondary revenue stream and working to get that to folks who can make decisions based on those data and do that analysis. So again, surfing and paddleboarding is huge. They're estimated 35 million global surfers now, but that's really just the beginning. And as we grow and expand, the goal is to get to kind of a modular sensor package that could be dropped into a lot of different form factors and enable citizen scientists who are participating in kind of any water activity or maybe even going to boats, but just expanding the ways that we can deploy these sensors, and then also expanding the sensing capabilities of the device itself. So our team is small. It's just 3 of us who co-founded. I'm doing a lot on kind of the engineering and operations side. Todd, who really can most be credited with coming up with this Smartfin idea, is actually a sculptor and documentary filmmaker by trade. And so he hand carved the original Smartfin profile, but then also is really good at kind of storytelling. And then we've brought in a chief design officer who's done a lot of work with us around defining the initial feature set for the app and the product strategy around that. Over the last 3 years since I've been with Smartfin, we've done a handful of accelerators. And interestingly, so Smartfin has kind of an all over the place organizational history. We're actually spun out from what used to be a project under a nonprofit, which made some sense, but not the most sense. And so kind of through these 3 accelerators, have landed on kind of the business model and the approach and the like kind of true startup organization that we're working with now. So again, we believe that the time is now. There's a huge market opportunity. We fill a gap, and there's lots of opportunities to expand. But also, the Smartfin idea has been around for a long time. They started working on the first iteration of it in 2013 or 2014, and we've never actually been in the market. Like, you've never been able to buy a Smartfin. And there are a number of reasons that we could talk more about why that's happened. But we have a little bit of engineering left to do and are really at this stage looking for kind of partners in fundraising to figure out those different pieces and get to a point where we can have a minimum viable product in the market, because I know we'll just learn a ton once we're able to do that. So I was excited to hear that lots of you want to order them, and unfortunately, you will not be able to do that today, although we will mark you down for as many as you want. Yeah, and so I have just a couple of appendix slides. I know I went through that kind of quickly, but I would love to just open it up to questions, and I'm happy to talk about absolutely anything from the technology to kind of how we got to this business model in the organization, and anything anyone's got.
I got one for you. I forget the protocol. Do you guys use the hand feature, or are we able to? Okay, I'll use the hand feature.
Okay, yeah, that's
hand feature. So does the unit transmit data while it's underwater, or is it in when it comes out from underwater and then it transmits?
Yeah, so right now it records while it's in the water. You probably know this, but since you can't get GPS ping, it gets a GPS ping every time it comes out of the water. And then when you take it out, the latest iteration of it is that it senses that it's dry now and then pushes the data to the cloud.
Cool. Yeah, this seems like a great idea for so many reasons. Just because, I mean, I come from a background of designing CTDs, and each one is as expensive as a cheaper car, and so you're kind of limited in how many you can buy, and just kind of the density and the resolution of the data. So this kind of begins to solve that problem as you go for way more units in the water. And I guess my question is, have you ever thought about, you must have thought about additional sensors as well, or and is that true? Are you thinking of any additional sensors?
Yeah, absolutely. So temperature was always kind of seemed like the best place to start. One, because there are good, inexpensive, small, off-the-shelf temperature sensors that you don't have to calibrate very often, which are some of the constraints around other things that they've tried. Originally, the goal was to have it be temperature and pH. The pH sensors that they were working with at that time just needed to be calibrated too often, and so didn't work well.
Yep.
But we've explored things like dissolved oxygen, salinity, and then even had some conversations about, like, could you put some acoustic monitoring stuff on this? Could you use it to track species, movement? Yeah, so I think that there's a ton more that could be done with, like, building out that suite of sensors.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I've got
there is just from a product perspective, we see down the line that there may end up being a split between, like, it'll start to get more and more expensive, right? If we're building in more sensors. And so how much does, regular surfer want to pay for versus, like, a researcher or somebody who's using it really for that.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Tom's got one.
Yeah, so as an oceanographer, I would say the connectivity would be a really good addition to this. You're not going to get the level of accuracy that something like AML would produce, where Dustin and I have both worked before. But you could put on a low resolution one, and that would be very valuable considering you're working in coastal environment, and the freshwater runoff there would be important to any of the oceanographers that are trying to look at this data and assess impact on species or what have you. So that would be something I would say would be really complementary to this, and given the environment the surfers are in, that would be quite useful. And being an acoustician myself, if you want to talk about acoustics on this, I'd be happy to toy around with that with you. It's going to be hard though, because anything riding on the surface is going to be really, really noisy, and it's going to be hard to hear anything else through the bubbles and the flow noise that you have on the surfboard. But it would be a fun project to play around with as a thought exercise.
Yeah, I'd love to chat more about that. The initial reason that idea came up is that we were thinking about, where is that intersection of what is useful both scientifically and also the surfer wants to know, in real time or close to it. And that was one of the things that came up as, temperature is helpful, right? Pick which wetsuit to wear kind of thing. But then, water quality, is it safe to be out there? Like really thinking about how we might provide more of those metrics as well, even if it's not directly from the Smartfin initially.
Scott's got one.
Thanks. Super interesting. The question I have is about the revenue or the sort of concept for the business model. Being in the data as a service business, I've learned a little bit about who's willing to pay and what they're willing to pay. That's been a very interesting journey over the last 5 to 7 years of my life. But what strikes me here is I've seen groups like the Schmid Foundation and others be very interested in trying to catalyze more data sources. And so there's that part of your revenue model in your slide there that has like folks willing to pay as a secondary revenue stream. To me, initially, it seems it might be philanthropic orgs that could be a really good target for that, because it's hard to sell data to oceanographers. I mean, there's a few on the line here. I'm sure they'll tell you. But I guess it's more of a comment on that. But I'm excited about the progress you've made. It's looking really good.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's been one of the most interesting things about figuring out the business model, is that when I came in, we were just at the beginning of, we're operating as a nonprofit. There was no plan to go to market ever. They were just going to always keep funding this philanthropically and just have a project, right? And so as we started to think about what makes it financially sustainable on its own, I think a lot of folks are initially like, oh, it's a data play, right? Like that must be it. And we've come to a very similar conclusion that it's like, we've really tried to structure the costs so that we think that we could cover almost everything just on fin sales, because that other piece of it just, it's not what I think someone might assume it would be.
Interesting. Yeah, great question and answers, guys. Daniel.
Yeah, hi, I love this. I have a question about the protocol. Do you use an open protocol? So I know what my readers always want to know is, what if the company that runs the app and the service, if they go home, if they are no longer around, could the user set up their own system to get the data?
That's an interesting question. I think that the answer is yes. So initially we were partnering with Axiom Data Sciences and using their, but it's, yeah, they had built out the database and stuff, and then it's just being transferred via LTE signal. So yeah, I haven't thought deeply about that question, but I think that someone with the right skill set likely could.
Okay, yeah, I noticed by my neighbor, she got 9, just for her heating, 9 connected thermostats. And a couple months later, the company just closed, and the app was useless, and then she had to get the old thermostats back, right? So if people invest in that, they want, often that's a question they ask. How do you do the LTE? Because I can imagine if someone takes that to a faraway country, that might get very expensive for you in roaming fees. How do you handle that?
Yeah, so that's actually something that I am interested in, the next iteration of the design of likely rolling back to Bluetooth. So when they made the choice to go to LTE, it was still the previous version of Bluetooth, or maybe Bluetooth Classic, or I don't remember exactly what the name was. And so it was slow. And they made this decision kind of based on the ability to make it more automatic and to have the data transfer faster. But as you say, and people travel internationally to surf, and you know what, if you want to take it somewhere else, it does create almost as many issues as it solves. And I think we're at a place also where having it be this automatic makes it difficult to tell when you got out of the water if your fin really did connect to the cloud and if the data were transmitted. And so and then also the automatic on and off mechanism means that it is possible for it to still think that it's on and follow you home, which you probably wouldn't want to have shared. And so I think we will explore going back to Bluetooth, having kind of an intermediary step of saying, you know, my ride is done, I'm choosing to upload the data, turning the thing off, and kind of walking back some of the things that have been made automatic.
Thank you.
And Tom's got another.
Yeah. So what's your sample rate, and where's the GPS antenna mounted? I.e., can you get GPS positions throughout your time on the water, so you can map an area in the water? But I was thinking for the accelerometer, you must have a fairly high sample rate.
Yeah, definitely. The GPS is limited by when it comes out. And so on this image here, the GPS is, do you see my mouse if I move it? Okay. It's
I don't see the mouse, no, but you see the picture.
Okay. It's as high as possible as it
I can see the mouse.
In the part of the fin that is in the board itself. And so the idea is that the board's on top of the water and the GPS is therefore out of the water as much as possible, because it's sitting up inside the board. That is the limiting factor on how many pings we get, but I don't think I have it handy, but when we have gotten traces of rides, you get it like at least 10 times a minute. Like it's pretty, you can really recreate someone's ride with that.
And what about the sample rate for the accelerometer?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but you're right. It's pretty frequent.
And John.
I was wondering, I'm wondering if the accelerometer can help you back out like your heave of your board, which I don't surf, but I suspect that you guys might be interested in like what the wave heights are and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's something that we haven't invested the time or energy in building yet. But what we're thinking is that by having this data attached to your board at a predictable angle and position, that you could use that to recreate, if you're trying to cut turns and stuff, did you get all the way to 12 o'clock, and really do some of that modeling in three-dimensional space. I think it's kind of a while down the road for us, but particularly compared to if you're tracking your surf on your watch or something, you're never going to get stuff like that. So
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I'm just thinking back to the CTD days again, and one thing that came up from customers is, is the device working? And so eventually adding something to an LED that was visible from the outside was pretty important for folks. I'm not sure if the Smartfin has one, but it's that would be one thing I would recommend.
yeah, it's a great point. So on this diagram, right at the center of where the logo concentric circles are, there is an LED there.
Oh, awesome.
The thing is, it still has been finicky, right? Like it should go through this kind of flashing white to blue sequence when it's in salt water and then gets a GPS lock and the steps there, but it's not, I think it's not yet as user-friendly as it, or helpful as it could be.
Oh, okay. Well, it's great that you've got one. Yeah, I think what I've noticed in the past is in-water sensors can be tricky. But as Tom was mentioning, it's you can think of an in-water sensor depending on how you design it as a very, very crude conductivity sensor. And so you're pretty close actually to already having a conductivity sensor on board in theory. So, but I will, Scott's got a good question here, I'm sure.
Well, I hope it's good. How much battery capacity do you carry in the fin?
They're about 8 hours in a vacuum. And so what we've told surfers is that it's enough for at least 3 2-hour surf sessions. Usually that gets folks through about a week. That's also one of the reasons that initially we were doing little thruster fins. We've gone to the 8-inch longboard fin, also because it's compatible with stand-up paddle boards, and that opens up a lot of opportunity, but you can fit a much bigger battery in those.
Yeah. Also, maybe ocean scientists are more often longboarders. Interesting market segment question.
Yeah, we did find, longboarders on the whole tend to be a little bit more environmentally minded.
Yeah.
And there's also some interesting trade-offs between, if someone's surfing, they tend to go kind of back and forth along the same stretch of water. Whereas if someone's on a stand-up paddleboard, then they usually go for a distance, like kind of out and back and around. And so you get really different and interesting stuff from both.
Yeah, follow up. How many fins have you produced? How many are out in the wild?
So there were about 300 of the thruster fins. And so there's, like a whole body of data that was collected with those through the San Diego pilot and then some other researchers that were using them. At that point, they took all of the learnings from that and did the redesign to go to this larger fin. And from there, we've been relatively hamstrung on funding to get those like across the line and out into the market. But that's the next step.
Cool. Yeah, Tom's got one.
So if somebody whacks this fin and breaks it off, are there any safety concerns with the battery?
Yes. So I think this is something that as we get more of these produced, we'll need to explore. But what we've done so far is taken a lot of effort to make sure that they're quite hard to break, because we'll need to think more about what happens with that battery and if there's ways to protect it if it does. But the image that you're seeing here was being manufactured by injection molding like half of the fin that was kind of the shell, and then sorry, the lights in this room are just like turning off. I'm not moving enough. Sorry. And then, so we were putting the electronics down in there and then laying it up with fiberglass sheets and then potting epoxy resin on top. So you have this kind of clamshell thing in 2 halves. And with those 2 different materials, the folks that tested that iteration did break a couple of them, hitting them on the bottom, not as hard as you might think you needed to break it. So since this image was taken, we've gone back to the original process that basically all high quality surfboard fins use to be manufactured, where it's laid up fiberglass and then our sensors get dropped in there and then it's more laid up fiberglass and it's all potted together. And those are really, really quite hard to break. And so, what happens to the battery if you do break one, I think is still a question to be answered, but they're much more robust.
Cool. Yeah, maybe I'll just put it out to the group. Any other questions? Oh, Ryan, welcome, Ryan. Do you have any questions?
Hi, I'm very sorry to have missed the meeting, but I look very much forward to the recording when it comes out. I do actually have a question, in spite of the fact that I missed most of the presentation. Apologies, Danica, for that. Obviously, it looks like you have a very interesting niche with applying this technology on surfboards, but is there potentially some way of finding other related markets for these, like on autonomous vehicles? I noticed we have somebody from Open Ocean Robotics here, and I'm just thinking about, obviously you don't want to necessarily run around and talk to a whole bunch of different markets, but if this is sort of something that could be adapted for some of those other kinds of vehicles, that could be really interesting.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely room to explore that. Initially, we'd like to start focused with the citizen science applications of this, and so thinking more broadly about water sports or activities, and thinking about other form factors that this sensor package could go into. Part where it gets interesting is that kind of the business model around the consumer device is that the data that are collected are useful scientifically, but then also interesting and useful to you as the user. And so that piece of it kind of goes away, or might. And then the other thing is that the way that this sensor package, at least initially, has been developed, it does rely on it coming out of the water at some point. So you're going out for a session and then saying, okay, like I'm done, transmit the data. And so there are some things that would need to change. But if the goal is to get as many of these low-cost sensors as possible deployed throughout that zone to gather as much data as possible, then certainly.
Oh, and Tom?
Yeah, be kind of cool to mount one of these things on our little ROV, just to be able to do inertial post-process inertial navigation for where the ROV was, but also as soon as we pop up to the surface to get a GPS fix on it. And anyway, it would be just kind of cool to add one onto the ROV.
You could mount it like a shark's fin.
Exactly, yeah. So as soon as you come up to the surface, you get a fix, which would be incredibly useful for me.
Just as an aside there, yeah, one of the like bigger publications that a researcher out of Exeter University worked on, he did pull it on an Atlantic transect on like a little boogie board basically behind a big boat. And so yeah, there are lots of ways to deploy them that are not the way that we intended.
Scott's got one.
I had a comment about the SIM card discussion. There are international eSIM deals that you probably know about already, where you could, in most jurisdictions, it could just be covered. So you might not have an issue. You might not have to change your hardware if you get a international SIM deal. So those exist. Another thing is Bluetooth's a lot slower than Wi-Fi, and what we've been finding is transmitting data over Wi-Fi, just even between like a phone or a PC and the object itself, is actually quite good. So there's easy to find little Wi-Fi modules that you can integrate into your PCB rather than Bluetooth. But I just wanted to put that out there. The eSIM and the international SIM could be a good kind of escape from that, what seems like a barrier.
Yeah, that's a good shout.
Cool, guys. Any other questions? Danick, that was awesome. Yeah, very, very, very interesting stuff. And thanks so much for presenting to us today. Looking forward to seeing how this progresses. And maybe we'll just end it there.
Dustin, if I can just make a comment, Danica asked me if she could get in touch with folks in Victoria who are doing research. So if any of you know folks who might want to make use of this data, just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, thanks for
Yep.
having me. Happy to answer any follow-up questions that come up or things. I think my contact info is available.
Awesome.
Danica, I'll send you a message because we have some opportunities here.
Thanks for that, Danica. That was fun.
Thanks.
Well done.
Awesome, guys. Well, we will, of course, Ryan's going to do the write-up, and we will be posting this to YouTube. So there will be more opportunities to watch it if you know of anyone, and also spread the word, I guess, for potential customers for the data. So we'll sign off for now. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.